Hello, Foreign Entanglements viewers. With me today is Michael Cohen. He has joined us on many previous occasions here on Foreign Entanglements. We are delighted to have him here again. Michael, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Can you remind me what your current affiliation is?
Well, for now, let's go with columnist for the Boston Globe and columnist for World Politics Review.
Oh yeah, no, you are though WPR. WPR has really. I am a former columnist for WPR, and
That's right. Yeah.
they do have always done a really good job of rotating through and of getting a lot of really good people in there. So.
Yeah, they have good people there. Yeah, and I don't know how I got on there, but they have a lot of good people for them.
Right. In the run up, I think what we're going to talk about today is going to be the thing that really is. I don't know how we can frame this, but I think that it's not an unintelligible claim to suggest that the most important thing that's going on in foreign policy and in international politics right now might be the American presidential election, because while there is some limit to the latitude that a new president will have with respect to what American foreign policy is going to look like. Who Americans choose as their president is going to be directly consequential for a whole host of different issues and events across the international system. And so, I know you've written quite a bit about this. I've been paying attention to it. I guess starting with the Republicans, there was a debate last night. It did not have the most entertaining figure in the Republican field, although I think he got far more press from avoiding the debate than he ever would have by going up there. You watched, I didn't. What happened?
Well, I would say I've now watched 7 of these Republican debates.
How have you done that and managed to retain? Actually, your hair is a little bit more wild than it normally is, and so
is it really? Yeah, okay. That may be because last night was. It's like I have a joke with my editor about at what point in the evening do I decide to throw my television out the window. And last night I think it came. It's more proverbial from out the window because it's a big TV. I couldn't pick it up if I wanted to anyway, get out the window. But the thing is that it came. I
Democrats, they can't even throw their own TVs out the window. Why would you?
Exactly. I think it came when Rubio used the word apocalyptic for the 5th time in the debate last night. 4 times in reference to ISIS, 1 time in reference to Iran. The way that I would describe Republican debates is on foreign policy is terrifying. And I mean that both substantively and as a descriptor. Terrifying because one of these clowns could actually be president and be responsible for foreign policy, which is terrifying. And the second part of it is terrifying in the sense that the way that they talk about foreign policy is to terrify people, is to scare them. And Marco Rubio who's supposedly the one, reasonably smart person on foreign policy in the group. He is the best example of this because all he does is try to scare Americans about ISIS. They're the biggest jihadist threat in the history of mankind, he said last night. They want an apocalyptic Armageddon, he said. We have to rebuild our military to confront them, as if our military is not the strongest in the world by several times. So this is the thing, is that you basically have a situation in which each of these candidates is just fear-mongering and threat-mongering over ISIS, over Iran, over every possible international threat. And it is reached a point where it's almost comical at this point. And I'll just tell you one story about, specifically, I was in New Hampshire last week, and I went to a place called Pittsfield, New Hampshire, which is about an hour north of Manchester. It was a little event for Chris Christie, like an employee town hall at a small kind of manufacturing plant. And Christie did his shtick, immigration and ISIS, talked about drugs. Actually had a relatively empathetic answer on drugs. But on ISIS, he basically played the same, card everyone else does. Says, these guys are a major threat and we should be worried about them. And was over, I asked the woman next to me, I said, what do you think of it? And she said, well, he was good. I mean, she was sort of not really sure what to say, what she thought. But then I asked her what issue really, was important to her. And she said, oh, ISIS. I'm really worried about ISIS. She said, I have kids and I have grandkids and I worry about what could happen to them and what kind of world they're coming of age in. And I'm really scared about it.
And there is no way to construct a list of things that are more likely to hurt her children than ISIS, right? I mean, it would involve like all of the other kids in the elementary school, right? It would involve cheese, And you could really
Definitely.
disaggregate that. Lots of different cheeses are more likely to kill her children than ISIS.
It's absolutely the case, and I wanted
Underdone
to.
pork. There's so many.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you had enough pork, definitely that would be more of a threat than ISIS, no question about it. I mean, that might also, really alarm ISIS if you eat lots of pork. But look, the thing is that she was totally earnest about it. She wasn't that she was making up. She felt worried about this, and I almost wanted to say to her, you can't be serious. They're not a threat. They've killed fewer Americans than the number of Americans killed by guns in a single day. Today, more Americans will be killed by guns than ISIS have ever killed. I want to say to her, if they do come to America, they're not coming to Pittsfield, New Hampshire. Like, that's not the place they're going to hit. Not like they're going New York, L.A., Pittsfield. That's not going to happen. But I didn't say that, of course. I didn't want to sort of get in an argument with her. I want to hear what she had to say. But I think that these words have a really negative effect, and the impact of what Republicans are saying is to just skew our foreign policy debates, even more than they're already skewed. And by the way, it's not just the Republicans. I mean, Democrats do it too. I mean, Obama, at least to his credit, certainly says, say the Union will say, this is not an existential threat. We shouldn't freak out over it. But he does say it's a serious threat. We have to be worried about it. I mean, even that is exaggerating the threat from ISIS. So I just think that, when you expect this kind of alarmism and sort of fear mongering in foreign policy debates, but it is just reached at a level that is just it's just extraordinary, and I think it's incredibly damaging.
I mean, to me, it sort of feels like, and I have the same feeling when I'm following. It's not as if there isn't a coherent. There are, there's a coherent liberal, a coherent leftist, and a coherent conservative case against the way that the Obama administration has practiced foreign policy. Right now, not that I agree with necessarily of them, but there are coherent cases, right? Coherent arguments that people bring up. But even following conservative Twitter, right? It really feels like that the paucity of the threats, like the small nature of the threats, means that they have to be shouted ever louder, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not as if it's the Soviet Union or something like that, right? I guess it's apparent. You don't have to shriek about how much of a danger it is, but ISIS, you have to shriek, because otherwise nobody will understand, because it doesn't seem like much of a threat.
But I think, but keep in mind, San Bernardino changed a lot of people's minds on this, right? So San Bernardino was like the thing where people talked about ISIS before, but once that happened, people got worried. And then all of a sudden, the rhetoric of the Republicans on ISIS and what happens in San Bernardino, comes together into this. Basically, the Republicans figure, here we have an opportunity. Here we can hit Obama. And here's the one thing and this is the point that I have made so many times in every debate that just makes me insane. And that is, every single time they talk about ISIS and the way to deal with ISIS, they lay out a strategy that is literally the exact same strategy we are currently implementing against ISIS. I mean, it's not the only difference I can come up with. I did this piece a couple of weeks ago about how Rubio and Clinton have basically the exact same anti-ISIS strategy. The only difference is they both want a no-fly zone. But basically, beyond that, which I view more as rhetoric than I do as like a serious proposal, beyond that, it's exactly the same idea, right? And the fact that, for example, ISIS has lost territory, that they are being pushed back, that from all accounts you're reading, they are feeling the bite of the military attacks against them, both by the Iraqis and
financial attacks, the attacks on the ground, the air attacks, right? And all this pressure is contributing.
And all of that is just it's not even factoring into the debate at all. It's not even part of the conversation, because I think for whatever reason, people just are not aware of it. Or they discount it, or they just don't hear it, or they don't understand it. And so you have this debate, which is not only is it fear-mongering, but the solution for it is just they're all saying the same thing. Now granted, some of them, like Ted Cruz, for example, who talks about carpet bombing, want to commit war crimes, right? So I mean, almost all of them last night said they want to take the wraps off of the military. They want to loosen the restrictions, which basically is code for saying we want them to commit war crimes, right? I mean, one thing I wrote about this a couple weeks ago too, and you'll certainly, I think you probably appreciate this, but like when someone talks about carpet bombing ISIS, there's a reason that doesn't happen. It's not just because it's against the law and it's against, it would be a war crime, but the military wouldn't do it.
Right.
right? I mean, the military's not going to go out there and say, we're going to kill innocent civilians. Like, we don't, that's not how we operate, actually. In fact, they go to great lengths not to do that. And that part of it is not even factored into the conversation at all either.
Well, and you come back to the same dilemma about this kind of stuff that you had during the Cold War, which is that we acknowledge on the one hand, or there's a claim on the one hand that's often acknowledged that ISIS is literally dominating the people, that it is tyrannizing over the people that is controlling, right, in all of these areas, right, both in Syria and that recognizing that ISIS does serve a variety of different ideological and sectarian, and that it does a bunch of stuff, but all of this grants that ISIS is in fact a tyrannical organization, and so the solution to resolving this tyrannical organization is to annihilate not only ISIS but the people who ISIS is tyrannizing, right? And that's who you're killing. You're killing the victims of ISIS, right? That's the people you're aiming for when you are talking about taking off the gloves and allowing more civilian casualties, and right, you are butchering the people that are ISIS the primary targets for torture.
But I don't think these people, they don't care. I mean, I think they would see that as a collateral damage to reducing the threat from ISIS. A threat, by the way, that basically doesn't really exist against the United States. I mean, this is the thing too. I mean, Rubio says the threat is unprecedented. It's not. It's barely even exists actually. So and I will say this. The thing that strikes me about this is I've watched all of these debates, Democratic and Republican, is that none of these people, with one exception, none of them are qualified to be president when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, none of them have any idea what they're talking about. None of them have thought about these issues. None of them seem to understand how the world actually operates. To the extent that it does operate, but they don't get it at all. And that, except for Hillary Clinton. And this isn't as much a plug for her as much as it is that she wins by default.
Right.
Because she's the only person who has any actual experience in foreign policy, and when she talks about it, sounds relatively sane. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the one thing for me, at least, that comes across in all of these conversations, is that this isn't really not even a debate. It's a debate between people who have no idea what they're talking about and just want to scare people.
Even the comparison with 2012, right? When Mitt Romney did not necessarily have a ton of experience in foreign affairs, but he actually had business experience that was relevant in foreign affairs, right? And I don't want to sing Mitt Romney's praises because I think too many people have done that with comparison to this crowd. But my goodness, there does seem to be.
I would consider Romney at the low level of foreign policy experience, but maybe he sort of qualifies. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is miles ahead of these people.
He did stuff that was international business stuff, right? And managing the Olympics and all this other stuff, which is relevant, right? It's not being Secretary of State, but it's relevant.
Right.
Now, I mean, there was some hope this year that, in particular, the candidacy of my Senator Paul, was going to bring some coherent, not exactly coherence, but some interesting diversity to Republican views on foreign policy, right? That there is a broad constituency in the Republican Party still that is not interested in, the kind of foreign policy adventurism we've seen. And that Paul could tap into this constituency. And so it was going to, that process was at least going to generate some ideological diversity. Even that his father had generated in the past, right? In 2008 and 2012, right? I mean, the Ron Paul candidacy actually did produce some, at least interesting conversation in these primaries about how much the United States should engage. But in this case, he's just a non-entity. It seems like he's just a non-entity.
He is, and I mean, I sort of ignored him in this conversation because he basically is so low on the polls and really isn't having any kind of impact. I think as far as politically, I mean, he does sound relatively sane on foreign policy. Again, it's a low bar, but he sounds relatively sane. I mean, to some extent, Paul's when he talks about foreign policy, he doesn't really, I think, grab the nuances that other folks might, but he at least isn't out there saying we should just bomb people for the sake of bombing people, which is a lot of what you hear. But I think what's interesting to me, and hasn't been explored as much, is Trump on foreign policy. Now, on one hand, he's completely, I wouldn't say insane, but he certainly says things that are awful, like we should just bomb the shit out of ISIS and do terrible things and commit war crimes and lock up the families of ISIS members and terrorists and so forth. But I'll put that on one side because it's sort of standard,
Right,
fare
and
for
his thing on
Republicans.
immigration too, and so we can sort of file that over there as well. And so,
Right, exactly. Yes. But on the other hand, he said something it was at the debate in Nevada in Las Vegas that he basically criticized the Iraq war and said, look, we wasted, $5 trillion in this war, we could be spending it at home. And it was an interesting line of argument that frankly, I think, if he used it more, it would make for a more interesting conversation. In the sense that there is an element to his talking about foreign policy. He basically says, look, we shouldn't be running around the world being the world's policeman. If we do it, we should like if we invade Iraq, we should take their oil. Right? We should take ISIS's oil. Right? He wants war as sort of a transactional experience, right? As sort of business experience. But beyond that, there is a populist sort of element to the way he talks about it that I think could actually benefit him politically if you talk more about foreign policy in those terms. Because to his credit, and I use that word really guardedly, he did come out against the war initially, and he has been critical of those who supported the Iraq War from the beginning. And on that count, certainly he was right. And I think he has this line where he says, "I'm the most militarist person in the world, but I don't want to go to war just for nothing. I want to get something out of it." Right. And I guess that's progress among Republicans, I suppose.
It seems like
but it's something different.
It seems like that was, sort of that line and that line of attack was relevant when he anticipated that Jeb Bush was going to be his primary competition, right? And attacking Bush on that point was going to be something that was really useful to him. But it hasn't, but Bush is, I actually think that and I diverge here from a lot of people. I think that Bush's chances are higher than most people still give him credit for. I think that there is this possibility for a regression to Bush in these next two primaries. But the whole Iraq attack line, right? It's not useful to use that against Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, who are not associated. Whatever position they may have now on what the war was, they are not associated in the public mind with the disaster that was the Iraq War.
No, it's true, and I think if it was head to head, you could certainly go after them a little bit more aggressively and saying, look, these guys want to go fight wars around the world. And certainly Rubio, you could certainly attack him on that line of argument because he basically is become the most militaristic of I think all of them, even more so than Cruz. Rubio's beating up on Cruz because Cruz is basically raised some issues about the NSA surveillance and Snowden, and he attacked him on that from the right. So in that sense, if you were going after Rubio, I think you could possibly hit him on that. But having said that, the fact is that this stuff plays in the Republican Party, and I think post San Bernardino and post Paris, I think it plays even more. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you've been hearing people say it. But I think in a general election campaign, I think it's less useful. I think all these guys would get hurt pretty badly by how militaristic they've been on foreign policy, and especially Rubio.
Right. The other interesting thing about Trump, too, is that he has displayed a far more pragmatic attitude towards Russia and China than almost any other candidate out there, right? He said, an entirely sensible thing. Look, the Russians are bombing in Syria. How is that a problem? He came out, which was, obviously doesn't capture all of the dynamics. There are reasons why Russian bombing in Syria is problematic, Russian presence in Syria. But it's a more complicated issue than most of them seem willing to grasp. And he did sort of take a God forbid I use the term, nuanced position on Russia's role here. And he also treats, Putin as a pragmatic problem, right? Which is one that can be practically managed.
Right, but I think he also kind of admires Putin. I wrote this piece a couple of a week or so ago that pointed out that he basically praised the Chinese after Tiananmen Square in 1990. He praised them for showing strength. He praised the North Korean leader for wiping out his enemies a couple of weeks ago. He did something similar, 20 years ago. And in 1990, he also criticized Gorbachev because he wasn't strong enough with domestic opposition. So I think part of him kind of admires Putin and admires, his authoritarianism.
He's voicing, but you are on Twitter too, right? He is voicing the admiration that so many right-wingers, even intellectually serious right-wingers have for Putin, right? You have these guys who Obama's getting his clock cleaned by Putin, right? And you get that every tweet, and we know who they are, right? And just the admiration drips from them, right? Why can't our president be more like Putin?
It's true. I mean, look, I think Trump admires them for different reasons, but yeah, absolutely, there is an element there where you have right wingers who sort of think, look, if we had someone like Putin, we'd be much stronger in the world. I mean, I think they definitely think that, and I think Trump kind of reflects that. The other thing too is, and this is the other part of his foreign policy, platform, for lack of a better term, is that he loves talking about trade, talking about all the countries that are ripping us off, and this is, I think, he is playing very much on xenophobic fears of the Chinese, of the Japanese, of Mexico, of other folks who are basically taking advantage of America. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is a huge part of the appeal that I think people have underappreciated. That it's everyone's sort of sticking it to America, right? The Republicans, they don't care about the grassroots, and Obama's doing all these terrible things, and the foreigners are also into it. When Trump's president, he'll stick it back to them. And I do think that kind of like crude kind of nationalism, it plays. And again, this is something that Trump's been talking about for 25 years. I mean, when he thought about running 4 years ago, he attacked the Chinese, he attacked the Saudis, he attacked the Japanese, he attacked the Koreans, all of them for basically ripping America off. And he's gonna stand up to that. So, I mean, I think there's a real healthy bit of nationalism and sort of nativism to Trump's appeal on foreign policy, that sort of coincides with somebody who's not as crazy as like Marco Rubio and Chris Christie. I don't think it's better, but it's certainly a different way to approach it than those guys are. But all of it is kind of bad, the way I put it. And the thing that gets me about someone like Trump, and any of these guys, I mean, can you imagine Trump sitting down with Putin? Can you imagine Bernie Sanders sitting down with Putin?
I actually can't imagine Trump sitting down with Putin, right? And that
can you?
Yeah, I can't imagine him sitting down with Xi, right? With Xi Jinping, right? That would be entirely.
Yes, that's a better one. Yeah,
Putin and Trump, I think, would you would see them in a car just like you saw Bush and Putin in a car, and they would have a good old time. But
yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's better. Can you imagine any of our allies? Imagine him with any of our NATO allies. I mean, I think they would all sort of like look at him with horror, as many of us do. But I want to also touch on the Democratic side too, because I think that's the other thing.
I mean, and you say about this Putin and Sanders. I mean, I read somewhere that Putin ran Sanders as an agent, from like 1973 through 1986. I mean, are you saying that's not true?
I hadn't heard that yet, but that's a good one, actually. I doubt it. I think they probably would have considered him not controllable and probably wasn't worth their time. So with Sanders, this is the thing about the Democratic side that I think is frustrating as well, which is that, look, if you look at Sanders and Clinton, whatever you think about her past views, she is clearly more experienced in foreign policy than he is. And the thing with Sanders is that when we talk about foreign policy, it becomes obvious that he doesn't really understand the issues that well, but also doesn't really care.
Right.
And the thing with Sanders that I definitely have picked up on is that it's not in his wheelhouse. Not income inequality, not big money. He just doesn't care. Right. It just doesn't interest him at all, and that's fine. That's not who he is. But he wants to be president, and he basically imagine him in charge of foreign policy. I find a little bit frightening because he has no experience and has no interest. And I think one thing I would say that we've learned over the years is that you come into the White House without any kind of foreign policy experience, not just experience internationally, having thought about foreign policy issues. You get rolled pretty quickly. And I think about someone like Bush and someone like Carter,
even
Johnson. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the situation of Obama, right? Obama knew more about foreign policy than Sanders does. Obama cared more about foreign policy than Sanders does. Which is not to say that his primary interest was foreign policy, and the revolutionary change in foreign policy that some Sanders supporter expects is impossible if you do not have a candidate who is absolutely committed to making it happen, right? Because he is, the first day he is going to face deeply hostile constituencies at state, in the military, in the Pentagon, in commerce, everywhere else. And it's not as if you can't fight many of those bureaucratic wars. You have to pick your wars, and the Obama administration has picked some of them, has won some of them, has lost some of them, right?
Yeah.
But those wars, those bureaucratic wars, require an intense amount of effort, an intense amount of interest, and a lot of knowledge about how all of this stuff works. And you make someone president who just doesn't really have an interest in this kind of thing, and nothing changes, right?
That's right.
Like every aspect that you dislike about American foreign policy, from the negotiation of trade agreements through drones, through everything else, continues unless you have somebody who like really stops it, right? And you can't
Right.
do that.
You can't, and it's a great point actually, and I think it's the biggest problem that with Sanders, and it's also, by the way, the biggest boost you can make for Clinton, even if you disagree with her past views. So one thing I'm struck by, and this is, I think it was The Nation that did their endorsement, where they basically they endorsed Sanders, and they basically criticized Hillary Clinton for supporting the Iraq War and for supporting interventions in Libya. Now, I give her a bit of a pass on Libya. I don't think she deserves much criticism as she gets on that. And I think she deserves criticism on Iraq. But the idea that you're going to assess this from the perspective of those two events as if there is not 95% of other things that the presidents deal with on foreign policy. The problem that I see in this is that there is a sense on the left that foreign policy is all about use of force, right? Where you are in use of force is basically how good you're going to be. And that's not actually how you should judge this, because that's a very, very small part of the job. Now, it's an important part of the job because, you know, it can lead to terrible decisions like in Iraq. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, foreign policy is about managing the bureaucracy. It's about managing diplomacy. It's about managing the alliances. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts here that Clinton understands because she's been in government and was Secretary of State for 4 years. I mean, she comes to the table with as much foreign policy experience as a Democrat, I don't know, than anybody I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, she really does have a lot of experience in foreign policy. Right. And I think because of that experience is less likely to make bad decisions, less likely to do something stupid, like Bush did with Iraq, like some things Clinton did in his first term, like some things that Carter did, like Johnson, like a lot of presidents without much experience. So, you know, that part of it is hard to translate to people. I've said to people a lot when they sort of criticize, and they call Hillary a neocon, which she's not, or they say she's a hawk, which she kind of is, but it's a little overstated, to say that, look, it's not about that. It's about who's the best person to run American foreign policy. And that's a hard conversation to have. People don't want to hear it. They just hear Iraq, and that's sort of the red flag for them. And I get why that is. But, you know, that part of it is missing. And I think when I step back from this, forget who I support or who I don't support, there's just no question about it that she has more experience and she's more qualified to be the foreign policy president than any of these guys. It's not even close. Not even within the realm of conversation, actually. She clearly is more qualified.
Right. And I mean, she was relatively popular with the State Department bureaucracy.
Yes.
I mean, she was well regarded as a manager, so there's a whole bunch of reasons why. You know, and it sounds, a lot of people hate the word continuity, but there's a lot of reason why you would expect a degree of competence and continuity with respect to how foreign policy is going to operate out of the gate with the Clinton administration in a way that, I mean, you just don't have any idea. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Democratic primary, but you know, a lot of you have to sit back and think, and not just with Trump, although this is a fascinating question with Trump. What do the appointments of a lot of these Republican presidential candidates look like? And I am kind of fascinated by Trump on this issue, right? Like, who is Trump going to make his Secretary of State? Where would he find a pool of people to staff the foreign policy positions in the executive branch, right? I mean, maybe he just keeps Ash Carter on, I guess, but it's kind of a scary question.
Well, part of me thinks he's probably more likely to bring people on who are maybe more establishment figures, people who are more solid, that, you know, recognizing what he doesn't know. I mean, he did say he would, in 2000, he said that he would be the trade rep if he became president. He would take that job, which, you know, we'll see how that works out. But that was his big thing. I mean, but, you know, you could do that too. I mean, you know, you could get all three of them on: do president, Secretary of Commerce, you know, do trade. You know, I think that is a good question. That's one that we haven't even gotten that deeply into. And the thing is with Hillary also, I mean, look, she's going to bring people on who were supportive of the Iraq War, who are probably more hawkish, who probably are more establishment figures. And, you know, I think that's reason for concern.
Samantha Power, Secretary of State, might be one direction.
Well, Samantha Power, I don't think get the job after the whole comments you made about her in 2008. They seem to have reached something detente, but I would imagine that she would. I mean, Jake Sullivan, I assume, will be national security advisor. I actually don't know who Secretary would be. I couldn't say. Maybe Michelle Flournoy at the Pentagon, which I don't love that. Wouldn't love that myself. I think she's, you know, or maybe keep on Ash Carter. I don't know. But I think in general that she would hire people who are, I don't know, not quite as solid as some of Obama's picks. But then again, Obama didn't make great picks in his first term either. But I think here's the thing I'd say about this. I mean, Obama is. I think at least his foreign policy performance has been pretty top notch. When it comes to foreign policy president, I'd put him in the top tier, easily in the top tier. And because he had a vision for foreign policy. I had a vision for what he wanted to do. He came in and said, I want to build the Iran issue. I want to get us out of Iraq. And I think he did badly in Afghanistan, but I think by and large, he's done a pretty good job sort of following through what he wanted to do. I don't sense with Hillary that she has a real strategy. I think she's more of a manager than anything else. I don't think she has a real vision. But that's fine. I'll take that over somebody who wants to come in and really change things up in a way that's bad.
In a sense, what Obama has done is to sort of reduce America's role to a managerial role rather than to a series of crises which can be managed. Right.
That's right.
So, and that supports a lot of Clinton's strengths. Right. Clinton's strengths are not necessarily as a grand strategist as the Iraq War suggests. Right. But as a manager, we expect her to be able to manage relations with allies. Right. Keep allies together. Be able to manage something like the current coalition against ISIS. Right. Be able to manage the Iran and Cuba situations.
Right.
Such that they are. Such that they remain on course and aren't completely derailed, right? And the shift of the United States sort of back towards this managerial role is something that I think has been the accomplishment of the Obama administration.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think you could actually argue that she would have been not as good a pick in 2008 to be president because you need someone who could really turn the page, who could move forward on a lot of really crucial issues like Iran, like ending the war in Iraq, for example, like sort of fixing some of the alliance relationships. So in that sense, Obama was the right better person for 08. But after what he's done, and as you put, I think that's a good way to put it. He's become more of a managerial sort of position for U.S. power. Hillary's a good sort of next step to Obama. It makes there's a lot of continuity between bringing her on after Obama because there's not a need for radical changes in American foreign policy. I mean, I think Obama has put things on a much more steady course. And even with something like ISIS, for example. Look, if she became president in a year from now, she ain't going to do anything different than Obama's doing. I mean, maybe she'll do something symbolically different to show that she's sort of turned the page, but in all reality, it won't be that much different. And I think in general, that's fine. I mean, that's going what we need, and she's competent enough and smart enough, has enough experience that she won't make the kind of mistakes that other presidents who coming in office have made.
So, how do you account for? I mean, I guess Bernie's disinterest in this, right? Is that basically how you account for the complete lack of foreign policy on the Democratic side? I mean, or the almost complete lack of foreign policy discussion on the Democratic side? Well, yes, it's interesting that he eschews one of the most effective levers of attack against Clinton, but that Obama used in 08, right, which was the foreign policy thing,
it is. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's because she doesn't want to talk about it. Look, he's not given a single major foreign policy speech this entire campaign. Mm-hmm. That's pretty unusual. I can't think of any candidate who's a serious candidate for president who hasn't given at least one major speech before the first caucus. Mm-hmm. And that to me suggests he doesn't care. Not his issue. Not his thing to talk about. And the problem is, in a way, it's weird. I mean, you go back and look at Hillary's speech she gave when she announced her candidacy back in Roosevelt Island. Mm-hmm. She didn't mention foreign policy at all. Her announcement video didn't mention foreign policy at all. She has decided, I think, she wants to talk about domestic issues, not because of Sanders. I think she decided that's what the electorate was for a general election. Mm-hmm. The thing that's weird is that's her best line of attack against Sanders, and she hasn't really used it. Mm-hmm. And when she has used it, she's not used it in a ham-handed way. Like she went after him on this actually, frankly, silly notion he said about how he wanted to reopen relations with Iran, which I think was actually not a really great suggestion. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the best way to attack him, I thought. But she's been attacking him from a hawkish direction. I mean, to me, the way you talk to him is that he has no experience. Mm-hmm. That's how you. Although people then will come back and say, "Well, you had experience and you voted for the Iraq War," so then you get back that conversation again. I mean, in a way, it's a no-win for her. Right. I mean, and that may be the decision that her campaign has made, that she just can't go after him in foreign policy because too many Democrats don't trust her because of what happened with Iraq. It's possible.
All right. Well, we're coming down to it, and I know that pundits hate making predictions that can go wrong. But this is going to come out shortly before the thing happens. So, what do you think is going to happen in Iowa?
Well, okay. So I wrote this piece a couple of days ago. So it doesn't matter what happens in Iowa, and I sort of still believe that because I think ultimately, Hillary is going to be the nominee no matter if she wins or loses in Iowa. And I think Trump probably the nominee, even if he wins or loses in Iowa. If he wins, it makes it more likely. Let's put it that way. And I think probably what's going to happen, especially after last night and Cruz sort of having a bad performance in the debate, my assumption is that Clinton and Trump will win the caucus. Now, I hate making predictions, especially this race, but that's what I think is going to happen. I don't want to say certainly, but I think that's probably what's going to happen. My guess is no matter what happens, though, Clinton, even if she loses Iowa and New Hampshire, she will win South Carolina and Nevada, and she'll win the nomination. And I think Trump, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Trump will probably be the nominee of the Republican Party this year,
Right. No,
which is a statement.
I share your belief on Clinton, right? That essentially, Sanders is, however impressive he may be in Iowa and New Hampshire, Iowa and Hampshire are especially not representative of the Democratic coalition, and he's not going to be able to build up the same kind of momentum that Obama built up
Absolutely.
in 2008. With Trump, I have to say I'm still a skeptic. I'm still a Trump skeptic. And I'll be very interested in what happens. I would still put my money on Cruz in Iowa. We will see, but you're right that over the past few days that has become to look like a slightly uglier bet. But I'll come out and say again that what we're going to have through Iowa, New Hampshire, what they are going to result in is Cruz and Trump, and then one of the establishment candidates. It's going to get narrowed to, and after that, I would not be surprised if that's Jeb. I will not be surprised if that's Jeb coming out of New Hampshire as the leader of the establishment pack.
The Jeb thing is interesting because I was thinking the same thing recently, but I just think his unfavorabilities among Republicans are so bad that I think if he was him against Trump, I think Trump would just clean the floor with him. I think for whatever reason, Trump he can't deal with Trump, and I think Bush has the wrong message and the wrong kind of persona for this cycle. I will just say this about Trump. This is the one thing that and this is I have been a Trump believer, if you will, that he could actually win for a while, but never truly had made that sort of step forward. But what happened in the last couple of weeks, I'll just say this is the one thing I'll leave on. About 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, everyone thought Cruz was going to win in Iowa, and Cruz would look like he's in the driver's seat. And then all of a sudden, Trump went after him on the eligibility thing, which really hurt Cruz. I mean, people don't get it. It really hurt Cruz. There's no question about it. There are a good number of Republicans who will not vote for somebody born in Canada or born outside the United States. And then he hit him on the unlikability thing, which nobody likes Cruz. I mean, this is the thing, is he's just an unlikable person. And Trump hit him on it. Trump hit him on his biggest weakness. And all of a sudden you see this, and I looked at this yesterday, I was writing a piece about this yesterday, his unfavorables have just fallen off a cliff. Yeah. Right? I mean, he was like the most popular Republican by far 2 weeks ago. 51% net favorability. Now it's at like 32. I mean, he has fallen, and I think it's almost exclusively because Trump went after him. And once Trump went after him, the other sort of establishment folks who don't like Cruz, who can't stand him, went after him as well. Right. And so when I saw that, I said, boy, this Trump guy, he might be a clown, he might be a demagogue, he might be a racist, he might be all of these terrible things, but he's pretty good at politics. Better than I thought he was. And I think just eviscerated Cruz in Iowa. I mean, and that was a race that everyone thought Cruz was going to win. The Times did a piece like 2 weeks ago saying everyone thinks Cruz is going to win in Iowa. And now everyone thinks he's going to lose in Iowa. And so the thing is that Trump is better at this than people thought he was, and Cruz is so unlikable and so hated by the establishment that I think, that just plays to Trump's advantage. And the thing is crazy is that Trump is a disaster for Republicans in a general election. He will destroy the party. But you have people saying that's true, but he's better than Cruz.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's the crazy thing.
Amazing, right?
Better Trump than 4 years of Ted Cruz. Is really wow.
Incredible.
I can't believe people are saying that, but they really
are.
They hate that. They hate him.
They really, really hate him.
I was going to say something else, but something regarding that, but it slipped my mind now. There's been some good work. I know people after the past 9 years of dealing with the nonsense with Obama's birth certificate, a lot of people just don't, especially on the left, just don't want to touch this Cruz thing, right? Because it seems so stupid, right? The whole rule is stupid in the first place, so why would you defend the rule? But, there's been some good work. And, Paul Campos, who writes for Lawyers Against Money, other stuff, have said, look, this is a legit question. It's not like McCain, where it's pretty easy to say he was on U.S. territory, even if it wasn't in the United States. It's not like Obama, who was clearly in the United States because Hawaii is an American state.
Right. So they say.
Yeah,
so they say.
There's a legit question here that, people should take more seriously. And, it's interesting that it's actually playing out in the Republican campaign.
But here's the thing. This is the thing with Trump and why he's kind of brilliant is that you don't need to convince everyone that this is the case. You just need to convince enough voters, especially in Iowa, that this is the case, that Cruz is not eligible and Trump can win. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that Cruz has a base of support, but if you can take away enough people who say, boy, I don't know if he's really eligible, and that's a real problem for me, then Trump can win. And here, I'll just say one scenario. If Trump wins Iowa and Cruz finishes second, I'm going to assume will happen. Let's go to New Hampshire. Let's say in New Hampshire, Trump wins, which everyone thinks he will win. I think he will. Mm-hmm. Someone like Kasich finishes second, or even Jeb. Then it hurts Cruz. It really hurts Rubio, because then where's Rubio's argument if he finishes third in Iowa and third in New Hampshire? Right. And then you look at it and goes to South Carolina, where Trump has a huge advantage. And then you say, okay, is Kasich, if he finishes second, or Bush going to win in South Carolina? Probably not. I mean, especially if it's Kasich would have no chance in South Carolina. And you look at the way the map plays itself out, and you say, who's going to beat him? Where do they stake their ground to beat Trump? But I don't see it. I just see these guys all circular firing squad with each other. Right. And that's kind of why I think Trump wins. And the problem is, if someone like Kasich or Bush wins in New Hampshire, it means Rubio will stay in the race, Cruz will stay in the race, the person who wins stay in the race, and you have a four-man race, which one person dominates, and that person's Trump. And I look at that and I say, Trump's going to win.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right, Michael, well, thank you for joining us today. For Entanglements viewers, please, thank you for watching. One time. For Foreign Entanglements viewers, I should note that you can still write us in at the Duck of Minerva's Best Foreign Policy Podcast. And so if that's something you want to do, then please go ahead and do that. And I'll leave a link in the comment threads. All right, well, Michael, thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you.
My pleasure.